Pierian, I think, is a real spirit in Bristol, and it's a cultural spirit. It's a wonderful support to lots of people. I think it's an inspiration to Bristol, to its people and to the City Council, and I think that it has got the City Council thinking in different ways. It's a home to a lot of people. It's always a welcome. And it's a healing place. It couldn't be a more important place to Bristol, and I think it leaves a great legacy.
The word Pierian, I mean, to me, it comes with that fountainous feel. I mean, June chose it. She wanted something to do with inspiration, and looking through books of quotes and so on, she found the Alexander Pope thing. A little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or taste not the Pierian spring.
When I first discovered it, I was on holiday, and we had no reference books. So I rang my parents up and said, "What does Pierian mean?" And they went off to all their books of reference, of which they had many on their shelves. And they came back half an hour later on the phone and said, "Right, we've got a book here and we've got a dictionary." And they'd done all this research and kind of discovered what the word meant.
And it is a spring on the slopes of initially Mount Parnassus, Mount Olympus. The Greeks kept moving down southwest through the Peloponnese, and each time they'd locate a sacred mountain, and yes, this is our sacred mountain, and the muses have to live here, so we'll find a spring. There's a spring. That's the Pierian spring.
What I wanted was to set up something that really reflected that Pierian quality of knowledge and inspiration, and gave people a place where, by the way that we looked after people and the environment, supported them in learning more and being inspired to be who they are and be the full potential of who they're capable of being.
It felt as though we were one of the first combining the different worlds. We're a social enterprise, we're a community interest company. We're not a branch of social services, and we're not a cultural charity. We've got no core funding from grant-giving bodies. We have to pay our own way. So the involvement of the corporate world is crucial as a source of income, and it's not a kind of a Robin Hood thing where we're ripping them off in order to do good elsewhere.
We have a corporate conference facility alongside health and well-being and complementary health practitioners, ranging from massage and kinesiology to acupuncture to counselling, hands-on healing, spiritual healing. We have the laughter club, we have yoga, we have groups who meet here once a month who are learning from each other as a sort of peer group about coaching skills in the corporate world. They might be here the same night as the gay tantra class. They all have tea and coffee in the morning room. And that's the place where all those people will bump into each other. Sometimes they don't converse, but they're still around a very different group of people from what they would necessarily normally be around in their normal working and everyday life.
Well, one of the greatest services that the Pierian Centre is offered is that sense of people come here and they get a sense of sort of looking outwards, not because necessarily they've come to look outwards, just because there are so many other things going on, and they just sort of see that kind of process happens naturally.
The leaflets in our racks obviously manifest the full spectrum of things that we do. So people in the coffee breaks will be browsing the rack, and we know we've had a number of bookings in both directions. People coming to a weekend course because they've picked something up when they've been here on a training day in their corporate existence. And likewise, whether it's Doors Open Day or someone coming to a Tibetan chanting thing or yoga class or whatever on a weekend, picking something up and saying, "Oh, I see you do weddings or you do conference facilities. I must take this back to work." So there's, to us, a beneficial kind of cross fertilization, and an important on the ground bringing people together, and a reminding of the corporate world that they do not exist in a separate accountancy universe where the only thing that matters is the profit that they make at the end of the day, and that they can discharge their corporate social responsibility in a kind of a layer of icing on the top of the cake. Their corporate social responsibility has to be imbued in the whole cake. Every mouthful has got to be engaged with the world around them.
1, 2.
We did an amazing team training day with John James, who's the conductor of the Bristol Ensemble, who said, "I want to come and use you as guinea pigs to see if looking at values of an organisation can then be presented in music." And what it did was it brought us to 4 values that seemed to be really powerfully embraced by the Pierian Centre and how we've worked.
It was just breathtaking, just how beautiful this place is. It's all the details, like you come in and there's a lovely smell of lilies, the flower of peace. That brings you in, and then you go from the chocolate biscuits to the lovely coffee, to the lovely tea. Everywhere, there's just a welcome everywhere.
It doesn't matter what they've come to the door for. Sometimes people just come to the door because they're lost and they want directions and all that. But they're just as important. They also have a valid sort of Pierian experience.
You feel equal. You feel you are the same people. You don't feel maybe you are as an asylum seeker, or maybe you are a small community. You're just treated as everybody, as equal. So I think in that way it really helped us, everybody to feel comfortable.
A couple of times there have been things on at the same time that stereotypically you wouldn't expect to be sympathetic towards each other, but there's sort of an air of respect in the Pierian Centre.
I think it was that sort of feeling of fairness towards everyone that made it easier for people to actually feel feel at home here and feel comfortable.
Decided really to go for it properly at Bristol Speakers Corner in March of this year, June had the idea that we should once again have the reenactment of some of the greatest speeches that have ever been made in the modern era. But he is a wonderful actor, and he's come from London again to celebrate today, help us celebrate today, and right now is about to give you the Martin Luther speech.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great telephone. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from the Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Must have been George III, signed into law the abolition of the slave trade in the British Empire. We put up a website and tried to get people all around the world at 12 noon ringing bells, and it was fairly primitive, but we got people in Antarctica, in Zimbabwe, in Sierra Leone, in Australia, in Canada, in various parts of the States, France, and around the UK, and a good crowd here. It was a moving moment because June's mum, who'd been ill, she'd had cancer for years, but had, in true Joe Burrow style, had fought it off and battled on. And she finally died. At that moment, her last thing was ringing a bell, which could not have been a finer way to go, and I think must have symbolised for June the fact that her mum understood what June was trying to do here. That was the end of one thing, the end of June's mum, and the start of us doing an increasing number of big, bold events.
We were embarking on the Anne Frank exhibition, and so the first thing clearly to do with something as big as that was to pull together a team. June was very happy to join that team. She was always full of positive ideas, not the kind of thing, well, we couldn't we, but let's go for it. What emerged with this fine team around the table was an energy into which June put a very great deal. The result was we had visiting the cathedral exhibition more than 10,000 people, but that connected to a citywide network of activity, all sorts of events through that period, and a lot of that work was actually brought together by June's connecting and enthusiasm.
One of the other underpinning sets of values was authenticity and social justice. And it felt to me that City of Sanctuary really represented these two values. That I am personally very driven by social justice. Well, I'm driven by fairness. And a lot of our work has actually been about creating through the arts projects which give people a voice who would otherwise not get it or would not be heard. And City of Sanctuary was a really important part of that.
Small actions can have big results! On this historic occasion, when Bristol becomes Bristol City of Sanctuary!
sense for me that the Pierian Centre was never good at ticking boxes, that we never conformed to the traditional way of being a charity or a business. In fact, being a community interest company is like a sort of bit between the two. And that because we didn't tick boxes and we didn't do things the way that everybody else does them, people found it very difficult to understand, funders found it very difficult to really get hold of what we were doing, and only in our closure is there a sense for me that people are beginning to go, yes, but without the Pierian Centre we won't have this or we won't have that. And it's always been there, but until it's under threat of being removed, it's very hard for people to go, but the Pierian Centre did all these things. And to put that in a funding bid was always impossibly difficult.
I am very saddened that the Pierian is closing at this time of all times, when public services, the NHS, local authorities, housing benefit, trebling of university tuition fees, all of these things in public life are under attack as never before. It's far worse than in the early 1980s during Thatcher, and we need something like the Pierian more now than ever before.
If you are part of an organisation like the Pierian Centre, one of the great strengths of which isn't so much to create content, but actually to value what other people do, and to be a collaborative organisation that encourages and brings people together, then sometimes that's quite difficult to evaluate. And so things like the European Year for the Ending of Poverty, there are two ways you could represent that. You could say, well, this particular year enabled a very wide range of people to meet each other across Bristol, and that was evidenced on College Green with a huge exhibition called Portents. The remarkable thing about that was that it brought together offerings from a huge number of communities right across Bristol.
It's always been with a real sense of bringing people together with you, and I've just watched as the staff in the Pierian have really developed and flourished, as people who've been associated with you in any way have really had an opportunity to think about themselves and think about where they want to go, and I think that you've been a tremendous role model for so many people in doing that. And it's interesting watching the pictures along the way, all the cataloguing. I think that's where it started, and then gradually every year you've just sort of widened and widened and widened the horizons. So it was kind of pretty small to begin with, and then it's just widened out, so that now it's become such a huge, really political place in all sorts of ways, with a small p, but just a place where people can just feel really at home and at one with themselves and with others, and that sense of just community has been just a marvellous thing to have developed here, and it's been through unlimited generosity, and I for one just really want to thank you for that.
As I rode out one morning, as I wandered o'er yon moss, I had no thoughts of missing till a soldier did me cross. He kindly did invite me to take the flowing boat. He advanced, he advanced me the money, 2 guineas and a crown.
Clearly that St Paul's, will be poorer for you know, the absence of such an extraordinary place as the Pierian Centre. And June, no doubt, will go on and tackle some other tiger of a project. And we mustn't forget, I think, that she had an extraordinary team of dedicated people, and that all of them can take extraordinary pride in what they have achieved, even though, you know, as with all extraordinary things, there has to be an end at some point, but I think it's an end for a beginning.
I actually know that there are already all sorts of things happening around the city that are happening in a different way because of the Pierian Centre's involvement. I don't think the Pierian Centre's ever actually done anything entirely on its own. We've always done it in partnership, in collaboration, and with other people. So although City of Sanctuary was an event that we managed, we could not have done it without the steering committee of all the people who are actually working day in, day out with refugee and asylum seekers. We simply energise things and bring people together and kind of like the touch paper, and then it goes poof. But I think that role is hugely important and should never be underestimated. Tonight, at the finale, we are symbolically closing the doors and everyone is going out into the garden. I hope some of you will be able to stay or come back for that. Each person will have a little light and a torch, and for me that is about inviting people to take whatever the Pierian Centre has meant and go and live it in another way amongst the people they know and love, amongst their workplaces, put on an event that actually they think is important to raise awareness, to give people voice.